My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Dave and Sarah Gregory. It's November 19th, 2025, and we're at Labora Wine Shop in Portland. Dave and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
First question, either one of you can take this and start, is why wine?
You want me to go?
Sure.
Frankly, I'm a self-hating neo-Marxist. I hate selling things for a living. I suppose on a broad conceptual level, we all have to sell something. But what gets me about wine is that fermentation has been part of human culture from the very onset of any kind of organized society. In my background, I was a high school teacher for a long time, and kind of wine is present in any ancient Near Eastern mythology. But more immediately, I think in my adulthood, why I fell in love with wine was not only the historical component, but the fact that it's about kind of the restoration of the human person as a product. It's a means for socializing, it's a means for enjoyment, but it's also deeply intellectual. You can get super geeky about it historically with regard to the production, with regard to appellations and varietals. So yeah, that just appeals to me as it's a body of knowledge that kind of begs infinite exploration. Yeah.
That was such a great answer for you. That was like so rooted in who you are as a person. Very, very good. Yeah, I mean, kind of to add on to that, I think you are touching on a little bit, but I have my background's in journalism, so storytelling and that has always been a big part of like what I've saw myself doing in my career. Initially, I thought like, oh, I would stick with journalism for a while. That changed in my early adulthood, but I think the more I think back on it, like how that has led me in some ways to wine. Yeah, because like there's so much storytelling in that, whether it's the stories of the people who make it, the stories of like the wine itself and how it came to be, and then just like storytelling around the like drinking wine, you know. Yeah.
All right, let's back up a little bit and talk about life before wine. Sarah, let's start with you. Tell us about where you're born and raised and kind of your early life into school.
I'm a native Oregonian, so.
Gives me street cred.
Yeah. I grew up in Aloha. I went to a school in Hillsborough. My dad was a school teacher, very much like he was in the Hillsborough School District for the majority of his career, and he likes to mention that he taught, which Ponzi was it?
Louisa Ponzi.
Louisa Ponzi in school. So he's like, you know, deeply rooted in the wine scene in that way. Yeah, so I grew up in Oregon, daughter of school teachers, but my dad was in addition to teaching English and photography, he also taught like a journalism course in my high school, which I took. So I was involved in broadcast journalism in high school as well as newspaper, and then eventually went to school for that and eventually ended up working at the ABC affiliate in Portland. Doing mostly editorial stuff behind the camera, but then a little bit of on camera here and there. And like I mentioned before, I was at that point in my life, I saw myself going into like being an on-camera reporter, and yeah, just eventually after 5 years in the industry, I realized I wanted to continue my education a little bit more, and I ended up getting my master's. I thought I saw myself after that going back into working in journalism, but the industry changed and my goals changed, and my master's in public administration, and with an emphasis in global leadership and nonprofit management. So I finished that right out of grad school. I got offered a job at a consulting company, which I like initially was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll get some experience in the, private sector, and it'll lead to doing some public sector stuff. They had some like pro bono stuff, and long story short is that I worked there for 2 years. Then we had our first child during the pandemic, and the pandemic kind of like for us caused us to like rethink some things, and yeah, I mean, I think I still have goals of going into nonprofit work down the road, maybe when this stuff is a little bit more like self-sustaining. But yeah, the wine stuff kind of happened in the middle of that.
Tell me about, I'm curious about which school did you go to for undergrad, and tell me about the work you did at broadcast journalism. What were some of the highlights as you look back at that part of your career?
Yeah, I went to University of Oregon. Yeah, they're very good for journalism, and I had some great experiences there. It's funny because I don't like think back on it all that often. Probably one of the big pieces that like formed like the initial part of my career was I did an internship over for like 8 weeks in New York at CBS News, and that was very influential. I got to do a lot of really exciting stories, meet people, and I thought I saw myself going back to a market like that, but after I came back to finish up one semester of school, I got offered the job at K2, and I do love Portland. I love, yeah, and so I just kind of like stuck around Portland because it's home.
All right, Dave, same question for you. Tell us about where you were born and raised.
Yeah, I'm from Queens, New York, but I sound like a Muppet rather than a New Yorker for reasons I struggle to understand. Yeah, my dad was a labor and employment law professor. He came from nothing. His dad was a butcher. His mom was a toy store clerk in Dearborn, Michigan. And so he began after he spent some time in the seminary, left that, began working for Ford Motor Company as like a labor relations guy. And so that kind of launched his career. So he helped train the attorneys that prosecuted Nike for child labor kind of violations and issues. My mom was an assistant district attorney. She prosecuted Trump back in the day, but neither of them really drank alcohol. And so, like, I grew up around it vaguely in so far as, like, raised Catholic, went to Mass every week. My mom is Jewish, so had Manischewitz at Passover, but that was, like, the extent of it. And I went to an all-boys Jesuit high school in Manhattan, which kind of I owe my life to in many ways, in more ways than one. And then I went to Georgetown, which is a Jesuit college, and I wound up kind of entering as a biochemistry major. But I had like this idea in the back of my head that I would become a Jesuit priest because I loved the Society of Jesus. I loved their generosity and humor and kind of progressive attitude. And so my beginning of philosophy class, my first day of class, the professor was like, philosophy is the practice of dying well. And I was like, well, fuck it. Why would I pursue an education to become a medical doctor when I can learn how to die well? And I switched gears to philosophy and theology because I fell more in love with the idea of becoming a priest. And entered the Jesuits after college, got kicked out after a couple of years for non-scandalous reasons. The vow of obedience was not for me, as the ginger can attest to. But yeah, that shaped who I was, and even though I wasn't kind of, the priesthood wasn't for me ultimately, like, I decided to devote myself to education. Because my own high school formation gave me who I am. And really, like, I fell in love with the vocation of helping love young adults into their humanities. And so after I left the Jesuits, I moved to California, to the Coachella Valley, where I found myself teaching in the country's first Jesuit-less Jesuit high school. So most Jesuit high schools have priests on staff. This did not, which is why they hired me. And I was in like a literal desert, but I was 24 years old, and my high school buddies and I decided to do like an sort of annual reunion trip, and we decided from the get-go to focus it on wine, and none of us knew anything about wine. We were just a bunch of like New York City kids, and we were like, well, let's do Santa Barbara. And so that was kind of like an epiphany moment for me, where we were at a tasting room for Shoestring Winery, and they gave us a piece of dark chocolate with the Syrah, and I was like, oh shit, this is amazing. But yeah, so I was in California, did a master's in biblical studies at the Claremont School of Theology, where I studied under Jewish professors, even though it was a Methodist seminary, because I realized in my theological academic training that was an area that I had so little familiarity with, and yet I'm half Jewish. And so yeah, my focus was on the prophetic and wisdom literature of the Bible. Then we met online. We met on OkCupid, which is a dating platform nobody uses, but it matches you algorithmically.
I feel like people use it sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, but it's not in
It does
vogue.
sound ancient now.
Yeah. And so Sarah had set her search criteria for anywhere, and I'd been on 2 dates with women who were like 92% matches, and they were awesome, but lived too far away, and Sarah was a 99% match.
Yeah.
And she was living up here, but she was like, I'm going to visit my sister in LA. She's like, would you want to go to Disneyland? I get free tickets because I work for the ABC affiliate. So we had a 14-hour first date. We were staring at each other at a shitty Mexican restaurant in downtown Disney at like 2 a.m, like, we should maybe think about this. So we dated long distance for a year, and then I moved up here. Took a job teaching at a Catholic high school here. Began my doctorate. I completed my doctorate in curriculum and instruction. And I did a qualitative kind of study on how theology teachers in Catholic high schools are rebelling against the mandated theological curriculum. So my background in education has always been teaching non-Catholic students. And so I always approach religion from a philosophical and historical point of view. I told kids coming in, like, there are those of you who believe in God who will not believe in God by the end of the year, and those of you who believe in, who do not believe in God who will believe in God by the end of the year. And if that doesn't happen, then I have messed up my job. And so yeah, my background's in critical pedagogy, I suppose, but also of a theological inclination. Yeah, so I moved up here, took that job, did the dissertation, kind of fell in love with wine, really here in Oregon, more so, apart from my buddies and I messing around each summer. Yeah.
We joined our first wine club. Well, actually, I think it was before we were married.
Yeah, you joined.
I joined a wine club, I don't know, maybe it was like a couple of years before we were married. I got a tax return. And I was like, I'm rich. And I was like, I'm going to do an adult thing. And I joined a winery. That was kind of the start.
But it was White Rose Estate.
White Rose,
and like,
yeah.
it was really Dago Guillen
Yeah,
in the tasting room, who was the first like tasting room manager or staff we talked to. I mean, Dago grew up with his brother Jesus
Yep.
in the vineyards. And like, it was from him that like, the intellectual side of like growing grapes and making wine was sparked.
But also approachable too.
And approachable. He's hilarious.
Like with a lot of joy.
Yeah,
you know?
with so much joy. Yeah. And then during the pandemic, as I was finishing my dissertation, we were like, let's sign up for French Wine Scholar, because we had a baby and we needed something to keep us sane, and it was a stupid credential to start with because it's so freaking hard.
Yeah. That was before we took, was that before?
That was before we took WSET,
Yeah.
and then we did WSET
Yeah.
1 through 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of like, thanks to Dago and the Wine and Spirit Archive and Mimi Martin. Yeah.
Those are some good guideposts along the way. I
For
like
sure.
that. So tell me about that. What you talked earlier about kind of what has drawn you to wine. Tell me about the learning of wine for both of you. What propelled you forward as you were learning? What excited you about understanding wine at that level?
I think, I mean, we've said this over and over again. We say it to people that come in here too. It's like the more, and also part of the reason why we focus on wine education as part of our business. For us, the more we learned about wine, the more we enjoyed the experience of drinking it. And that continues even to this day, right? Like wine, you can't stop learning. Like there's so much information to learn. And sometimes it's like, sometimes you can feel a little bit imposter syndrome. Like, we've been working in the industry now for 3-4 years and stuff. And still there's still so much I don't know, but that's also at the same time what I love about it too. So.
Yeah, I think of it as kind of like wine is a thing of intellectual hedonism and hedonic intellectualism, and like either people are drawn to it because they can geek out about it, because they can learn so much, or they're drawn to it because they find that it enhances their life, their meals, their relationships. And so I love the fact that it moves kind of between these two areas. Yeah.
Tell me about the French wine scholars program. You said it was hard. Tell me about getting through it.
Well, it was a lot of pure memorization, right? And also it was just our first exposure to that sort of thing. Like, okay, we have to memorize all the appellations and also all the grapes that are allowed in each appellation. And on top of that, this test is going to ask you 50 questions, and it's just like, know all the information and just be ready for anything. So, plus, I don't, I've taken like a year and a half of Duolingo, but like I don't speak French, so like that's another level of like just committing the information to memory is harder when it's not your language, Dave's taken some French, so that was a little bit easier.
Yeah, I went to a kindergarten with nuns and took French for 13 years, so by no means am I fluent, but at least the pronunciation and the reading of kind of French words isn't, an obstacle. But yeah, I never had to study a map in my life apart from middle school, and then all of a sudden, I'm frickin' taking notes on maps and making flashcards, and like brute memorization is not my favorite form of learning, but it's just something that's requisite for these kind of like wine credentials. Yeah.
Nobody's testing you on it in your day-to-day, of course.
Yeah.
But
like we taste anywhere between like 50 and 80 wines a week, and so there's so much learning that goes on in perpetuity as like buyers. Yeah.
You mentioned, Sarah, something that I think is really interesting. Talk about the more you learn wine, the more you're enjoying the tasting of wine. So tell me about developing a palate, finding what wines you like, finding what regions you like, finding all of that. How did that develop for you?
I mean, that's also constantly evolving too, right? Of course, Oregon Pinot was the first wine to have my heart, and it's still very much something I love. But like, people all often here will ask you like, "What's your favorite wine?" I'm like, I don't. How is anyone supposed to pick that? And it'll change from day to day, and your palate's constantly evolving. I think one thing that's interesting is that like when you first begin getting into wine, you're very concerned about, and this is less about my preferences, but more just about like the process of tasting. You're very concerned about having like the right answers or picking up, like I've picked up X, X, and X. And like to a certain degree, the SOM tests and those kinds of things make you feel like that's what you should be doing. But the longer you're in wine, I've felt like you also start to be like, but does that matter? Like, taste is so subjective. I mean, and certainly it's an important skill to be able to think about the flavors that you are tasting. But yeah, I guess at some level too, it's like, what does that matter in the long run? Do you have something more to add to that?
Yeah,
I feel like I need to say.
I'm struck by what we spent a couple weeks in France with family, and we visited Eric Rodez, the champagne grower, and he said something. He was like, "Does it give pleasure? Or does it not?"
Yeah.
And so, like, when I'm up here at the bar tasting wines with sales reps, like, I'm taking a ton of notes, but like, I don't take tasting notes. It's just about the story of the producer and the region and how the wine kind of came into existence and whether I like it or not. I'm not focusing on, is it orchard fruit or stone fruit? What's the tannic structure? What's the acid structure? Yeah, that's the least kind of interesting thing to me. But I've also never prided myself on my palate. Like, I've never done too many blind
You have a good
tastings.
palate. It's not.
Yeah, but it's not a game I'm interested in playing.
Yeah.
It's not what I find compelling.
So let's follow up on that, because I was going to ask you this later anyway. What is compelling about wine? As now that you're on, we'll get to how you got to the sales point here in a second, but what is a compelling story for you? What is compelling about a bottle of wine? Why are you going to choose to put something on your shelf?
The people behind it.
Yeah. It all boils down to the people. Increasingly, and this is kind of an ethic that we began with, but we've
Leaned into it.
of course dialed in and leaned into it better and better, but like the wines we work with are made by people who aren't backed by multinational conglomerates. Like, these are farmers and families, and the human person is an infinite mystery, and like, one can never know the fullness of kind of where a bottle of wine comes from, but a single bottle, like, there are hundreds of years, if not thousands, that have led up to its existence. And so it is, and I don't think this sounds like hyperbole, but I don't think it is, like, each bottle is its own miracle. Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't want to, that's what I find compelling about that. It's mystery in glass. It's joy in glass. It's beauty in glass. It's truth in glass. Yeah.
It's an art.
So you mentioned that a lot of this started kind of during the pandemic. Things start to change. Things start to you got to kind of reevaluate. So take us from there to how this came into being. What are the steps along the way that lead to this place existing?
Yeah.
Idiocy.
Yeah. Being pretty naive and
Existential crisis.
Yeah. It's worked out, but it's, yeah, I mean, the story that we tell people when they ask is like, Dave, and you can talk about this more if you want, but Dave had a terrible principal at the school that he was at. He was like, I'm done with this. He resigned in protest because of some things the person was doing. And he's like, I'm going to go pour wine in a tasting room for a year. And I was like, okay, wow, big move.
It's because we had been doing WSET and
because
French wine scholar.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was on a walk with our baby and walking around this neighborhood, and I saw this place was for lease, and
We'd begun to look into commercial properties,
let me
but
think
we were
about
like,
this. Yeah. We actually had the idea. But basically, I was like, well, what if we did something together? What if because I'd been on maternity leave, and then the pandemic, stayed home with our baby for like an extra 6 months after that. And
not a fun time to have a baby.
yeah, it was hard. There's nothing to, stuck in the house. And
Baby's the only reason
socialization.
why she didn't kill me.
No, it's not true. So I was on walk, and we were like, saw this place. And
We live a 10-minute walk that way.
Yeah. Oh, and the Jesuit connection. You should talk about that.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, this place was not nearly as expensive as other commercial places we'd looked at.
Just a lot of places are like new constructions. This is an older building.
Yeah.
100.
And so we called them and we took a tour, and there was a crucifix in the basement. And I was like, what was this? He was like, this was the former headquarters of Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest. And so there's basically JVC is an organization where people generally right out of college, live in community, and they volunteer their time for a year working in some sort of nonprofit. And so we kind of like shook hands on the spot. We were like, all right, I guess we're doing this. But a dude who like I was in the Jesuits with, who's now the head of mission ministry at the high school I went to, lived upstairs as a Jesuit novice after graduating from Harvard. And I think Hunter Biden might have lived upstairs because he was a JV in Portland. But yeah, like this is a 110-year-old building. The Black Panthers met in the basement back in the day. Like we've been, and so,
One of Portland's like major black newspapers was printed up. Was it printed upstairs? Is
I
that
think
right?
out of the basement, yeah, the Northwest Defender,
Northwest
the
Defenders,
predecessor
yeah.
to the Scanner. So yeah, like the price was right. My dad died, and because he was so frugal, he loved buying into life insurance, and so he passed away, and like that's how this came about because of his life insurance policy, frankly. Yeah. And so we Googled around, and there was this company called Sami, and Vienne is the shit. The dude was an aerospace engineer and spent like years trying to engineer the perfect refrigerated wine cabinet. And after doing that, he found that the market wasn't big enough, so that he had to expand the business to do like cellars. And so he mostly does residential projects, but we were one of the first commercial projects that he did. And his cabinet maker is one of the founding carpenters of the joinery and is just a master at what he does. And so yeah, we put up, lighting and wallpaper, and
Wallpaper in the bathroom.
took 6 months for the cabinetry and the
that.
bar to be built. But yeah, that's kind of how it came to be. And the other important thing, so I was telling a woman, one of my best friends at the school I was teaching at, like, I think we're going to open a wine shop. And she's like, you should talk to my brother-in-law. Neither of us were in the industry, and Oliver sold wine in New York and LA. And he's like, yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at the kind of distributor books. And so the summer before we opened, like May, June, July, August of 2022, we tasted through thousands of wines. We were meeting with sales reps in our house. And then once we got the keys here, we began tasting here. So yeah, all thanks to kind of Oliver, and those sales reps that we worked with in those initial months. We just kind of fell into the niche of natural wine, which is what we were into before, but like clean natural wine. Like there are places
prefer to use the term low intervention is usually what we
low
talk about
intervention. Like our palates tend toward the clean and classic. There are some places that focus on 0.0 wines, but just because of what we had been drinking and
as well as small production.
Yeah, and small production also. That's kind of what we do.
Tell me about that. Well, actually, before we get to that, you find the space. You've been talking about you find the space. Tell me about, I guess, kind of what you want to present to the world, from the name to the branding to the look to the wines. What is it that you want to say with the space?
You should talk about the name, because that originally was your idea.
Yeah, we. I mean, weird Catholic boy thing.
He's like, let's do a Latin name that nobody was going to understand or pronounce correctly the first time, usually.
I love weird religious history. I adore it. And monks gave us wine as we know it in many ways. And I had spent time in retreats at Benedictine monasteries in college, and I try to visit monasteries wherever I go just because I find the life so fascinating and enchanting. And we were in California on one of these high school buddy wine trips, and we were meeting with Paul Lotto, who's a Santa Barbara producer, and he's got a bottle called Ora et Labora. And I was like, well, why Ora et Labora? And the answer is because Ora et Labora is the motto of the Benedictine and Cistercian monks.
And it's prayer and labor.
Prayer and labor. And I was like, well, why that name? And he's like, well, because you pray for really good weather, and you do all the work in the vineyards, and then you do all the work bringing the fruit in and processing it, fermentation, you put it into vessel and pray that it comes out okay. And so not only the historical connection, the monastic origins of wine, but really kind of like the symbolism that what we have in wine is a product that is the synthesis of human agency and things outside of our control. On a weirder level, Saint Benedict, in the Rule of Saint Benedict, he was the first to kind of organize monastic life in 1,500 years ago, but his whole thing is that communities of monks treat every stranger as Christ. And so if a stranger comes to the monastery door, they are to be fed and bathed and given clothing if they need it. And so when we think of like, well, what is hospitality about? This is something that I continue to think about and ponder, but kind of like the spirituality of hospitality. I love Jesus. I'm not like, to make it clear, we aren't kind of like...
You're not proselytizing.
Yeah, but like that's just kind of the core of what this is about for me, that every guest is treated with the utmost dignity and respect.
And like part of that too, like, is that when we kind of conceived of the idea, we wanted the space to feel warm and inviting, and to not make people, I mean, we were new to the wine industry, and we were like, in some ways that's an advantage, because it's like we're learning alongside the people that come in here in some ways, you know what I mean? Like, and we don't want people to feel like, I don't know, that they don't know enough, or they don't drink enough wine, or the right wine, or whatever. It's just, yeah.
So you mentioned before opening, you tried a lot of wines. Tell me about honing in on what you were going to present originally, and how you were going to present them. What was going to bring people to the place?
Well, we thought...
Oh yeah, we definitely thought this was going to be more
of a bottle shop, but the neighborhood really embraced us as a bar, which is great.
And the bottle shop part has grown over the years,
yeah.
for sure.
So we're becoming a little bit of a destination place. Like, people read about us, and if they're visiting Portland, they'll come to us, and that's always wonderful. But yeah, the root of it is kind of curating our glass pours and the bottles. I like to think of these wines as being hyper traditional, but also esoteric. And so that we certainly carry some like new wave, newfangled experimental things, but really the core of what we're about is exposing people to unknown regions and varietals.
Give me an example.
Not that it's, would you say like Pinot from Germany or something like that? Is that a
Yeah.
good example?
So,
Not that it's unknown, but maybe
Yeah.
not the first place that somebody would think of when they're thinking of Pinot
yeah, Pinot from
from the Baden. Or
maybe pointing out
You wanna go
this,
Go grab it.
like, so, I mean, the wall is organized not by region or by varietal, but by body complexity intensity. So essentially you have sparkling wine on the right, moving into white, skin contact rosé and red, because we have like, I don't know, 10 Pinot Noirs in the whole shop of our 350 or so SKUs, maybe a little bit more. But like, so if somebody wants Pinot, we're like, oh, there are Pinots kind of all along here. But like, if I'm looking for something light to medium bodied at like 12% alcohol, like, this is where I'm gonna look. But there's like Gamay from the Vallée d'Aosta, Nerello Mascalese from Mount Etna, Portuguese stuff, Languedoc stuff. And so like, not that many people are familiar with like the dry wines of the Douro Valley. And like, people know that they can come in here and they're like, okay, well, I'm looking to get a nice bottle of Pinot. And I always ask, do you want to stick to what you know, or do you want to kind of venture out? Like, do you want to mess around a bit? And so like we've become like, I don't know, one of my guiding kind of like principles in looking for wines is stuff that like is incredible value. And so like there are places like Germany where the farming is so dialed in, where like the vineyards are so steep that nothing can be mechanized, where you have tradition going back centuries, and yet they're incredible bottles for like $30. And like German Pinot will rival for 99.99% of consumers, at least our client base, Premier and Grand Cru Burgundy. Like this is equally as pleasurable and enjoyable as something that is 3 or 4 times the price. Yeah, that was a long answer.
Great answer. How do you discover wines like that?
Well, part of it's the relationship that we've built with some of the distributors, right? So like
We work with like
trust there.
15 distributors. Gradually, I'm leaning more and more away from the larger companies because we're like a small mom and pop shop. And so like
we want to represent that.
we want to represent that at every level of where we source from. So yeah, it's all about like sales reps bringing stuff to us. Like, hey, there's something in the bag that you need to try that you're going to love. And so certainly we've leaned into some portfolios more than others, just because like that's the stuff that you don't find many places, that I think there are stories that need to be told that aren't being told. Yeah.
So after all the work that's gone into this, tell me about opening this, and tell me about the first 6 months to a year of having a wine shop.
I've blocked it out.
Yeah, we got an au pair for our first year because like it was the only affordable way to do childcare while opening a small business, and it was like
Plus, it was still kind of the end of the pandemic, so like everything,
And I mean, it was just the two of us for the. Let me think about this.
In terms of like employees, we didn't have any employees.
We signed the lease June, got the keys August, right? And we were meeting with sales reps throughout the summer, and then wine started getting delivered in like September, October.
And then we opened December
22.
which it was a very fast timeline when we look back on it. But at the time, we just had like unrealistic expectations. We thought we were going to open in October maybe, or earlier than that. Anyway, I do remember, I have a vivid memory of somebody delivering wine here. And I don't remember exactly what week it was, but I think it might have been when the shelves were like not quite up yet. Like they were half done or in part, and it was like maybe 3 or 4 weeks out. And I remember telling him like, this is our open date. And he was like, okay.
Yeah, 2 days, 1 day before we opened, the shelving, so
Oh yeah, well we ended up doing half the shelving.
Garrett, the winemaker, his dad passed away in the middle of building this out. So we had our grand opening without the top half being installed. And the couple days before our opening, all of Sarah's family was here. Her siblings, her parents, and friends helping us unbox wine. I took 4 loads.
Like literally covering the floor.
Yeah,
Like,
in my 4 loads of cardboard to the dump. Like, we
probably could have started a little smaller, but that's lesson learned.
We had never done this. We were stupid. Neither of us had done a business or run a business.
There's a lot you learn in the first few years.
We learned, I think 3 weeks before we were opening, that we had to have a commercial dishwasher, which anybody in the restaurant industry would have known, but we did not. And so we scrambled to get a commercial dishwasher, which required getting new...
Because old pipes, so that was like complicated.
Had to find a dishwasher that would fit the specs, and getting a new electrical line installed and upgrading the box, and like just, silly shit like that we, because we were total newbies, didn't know how to approach.
Also, I don't know if it's obvious, that clearly, I mean, it's become, like, we figured it out and stuff, but that was not really our strong suit. So, like, we were all like, people, stories, yay. But, like, okay, there's also, like, the logistics. Like, you know. So, we've, you know, developed and learned, and yeah.
So the doors are open, December 2022. Tell
Yep.
me about that. Tell me about having people in here and starting to have a business.
Yeah, we opened the week before Christmas, so, and we had like a little grand opening thing that, like, I don't know about you, but like, I was like amazed by how many people showed up.
Yeah.
One of the really cool things about Portland is like each neighborhood, like, people just love their neighborhoods, right? And so, and a lot of neighborhoods in Portland also have their little bottle shops, wine bars like us, and so the neighborhood really embraced us because I think that it was looking for something like that, because there wasn't anything. There were breweries along Williams, but not wine spots much to speak of. Of course, now a few have popped up, which is great, you know. So it was, yeah, the grand opening was great. We were definitely overwhelmed by the number of people, but that was really cool.
Somebody from our WSET class
That came and
who
helped us, yeah.
came and helped us the first couple days. And yeah, so we closed down in January for the
Oh, but then there's a snowstorm, like the week after that.
storm.
Yeah, and everything closed.
No, there was an ice storm our second day.
Was there a second day?
Yeah, and so we were opening late. We put on Instagram, hey, we're going to open late, like an hour late at 2 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock. And there was a group of people outside the door who had come to the first night, and
They were like waiting there.
they were like waiting there.
It was great.
Yeah.
It's like, what else are you going to do when you can't drive anywhere? So, yeah, walk down the street.
So from there, tell me about what you've added to the shop. Obviously, you have education classes, things like that, events.
Yep.
Tell me about adding those, deciding what you want to do and starting to add those kinds of things.
Well, the biggest piece is that we added the room next door. I don't know if you've seen it, but about a year in that, so that space, it's basically like a mirror of this. And it was a graphic design firm. They had an office space, but they were ready to leave, and so we got the opportunity to do it. You know, and it was maybe a little early in the process for us, but at the same time, we were like, if we don't take this opportunity now, it's probably not going to come around anytime soon. And so we were like, part of it is that we were doing our wine classes in this space.
So you have to kick everybody out at like 6 o'clock.
It was tricky. It was, yeah, we were like, and also the space was limited, and yeah. So yeah, we were doing our wine classes on, I think we were doing them at that point on Thursdays, and everybody would have to leave, and
Less than ideal.
yeah.
So yeah.
Having that second space, not only have we done, like, expanded it into an event space, which has been like opening a whole nother business at the, you know, but also it's allowed us to do even more wine classes with more people, and as well as like tasting events and yeah, that kind of stuff. It's been great.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the business has grown in the sense that, like, people come to us now for bottles more and more. Our, like, monthly wine club.
And outside of the neighborhood.
Yeah. But the other side is, like, the people who have come to us. So, like, 2 months in February, we had, like, a Valentine's Day concert. And there's this woman who came with her boyfriend. She's like, hi, my name's Deanna. Like, have a 9 to 5, but I've always worked in wine on the side. She grew up in Paris. She was like, are you looking for help? And Sarah and I looked at each other like, actually, we were just talking about how we could use an additional set of hands. And then a few months later, we hired one of our sales reps approached us and was like, hey, could I pick up a couple shifts? And we were like, sure. Then a couple months into his working with us, he was like, can we make this full time?
And then another one of our employees now, she was in one of our initial wine classes. And yeah, it's just every person that's joined the team has really come to us very organically.
We haven't posted a job.
Yeah.
Our barbacks are
Former students.
almost all kids I taught. So Yeah. Marlene was like in the very first class of kids I taught when I moved here, and she just graduated college. So yeah, it's a joy to be able to have people working here who like want to work here, who enjoy the work, who find it a nice community, and yeah.
Talk about the wine classes. What kind of classes do you offer? What is important about those classes to you and to the business?
Yeah, so I mean, our first few months, we were doing the same 3 classes on cycle. So,
Which we've now kind of branded as our foundations classes.
yeah, so it was kind of like wine for newbies, like how wine is made and how to read a label, and then demystifying wine tasting and food and wine pairing. And so for the first 3 or 4 months, we were just doing those 3 classes, rotating every week. And then we began to introduce kind of like, we kind of conceptualized it in 3 areas. Those foundations classes that are more like regionally and varietally specific, that are kind of people who are already a bit nerdy, who know something about wine. And then these just for fun classes that are like weird wines, like bubbly pink wines, like
Yeah. Sometimes wines for the grill, or like we've done a lot of different ones.
yeah, close contact with skin contact. So yeah, like stuff that, but the bottom, like I want people to be able to come to our Bordeaux and Burgundy class without having much experience in those areas. And the classes are they were never meant to be like a profit maker, but they're a way for us to like build a community around the shop, and to truly help people enjoy what they're drinking more.
And they get to taste wines that they might not be exposed to, because it's like they're tasting 6 different wines, and whether it's from that region or, you know, depending on what the topic is. And so, yeah, it's a fun experience.
Now, recently I know you had a series of events, I believe protest, wine and protest. Is that correct?
Yeah, protest pours.
Yeah.
Protest pours. Tell me about the protest pours.
Yeah, the whole thing was Sarah's idea, because
Well, yes, but also
it was. I mean, months ago we were like, okay, how can we've talked about
respond to.
needs of the time, and we had talked about making this a nonprofit, which like is still in the back of my head. But like, what can we do immediately in some small way for the community? How can we leverage the business for the common good? And not trying to virtue signal. But yeah, it's like, how can we do something good? And so the idea was, given kind of like my background as a theology teacher, can we invite speakers from a variety of kind of religious traditions and secular traditions to talk about how we can exist, rebel, in this geopolitical climate. And so we donate 100% of all the profits from the glass pours to a nonprofit of the speakers choosing. But yeah, we're...
And it's pretty open-ended, because all the speakers can kind of choose to, like, we kind of give them that intro and they can take it wherever they want.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So yeah, that's what the protest. So we've had like Shombe Brown, who is the head of DEI at University of Portland, who's a friend of ours. Rabbi Brian, who's a fellow I've known since going to magic camp as a kid, gave a talk on, gave a reading from his book, Rabbi Brian's Highly Unorthodox Gospel, in which he has a chapter called God Doesn't Have a Dick, to give you a sense of the kind of people that we... Beatrice, who's a winemaker, who gave a talk called Most Holy Blood, the Reunification of God, Wine, and Transness, which brought everybody in the room to tears. So yeah. Paul, who's a deaf-blind hospital chaplain. Yeah, so we're excited to see kind of like where it goes. Yeah.
What's been the response so far?
I mean, we've had about 20 to 30 people at each event, and it's grown a little bit, and there are people who come who like, we were at for example, the Deep Roots Coalition tasting last week, and the assistant winemaker at Cameron was like, yeah, I came to Beatrice's protest pours. I was like, that's why you look familiar.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are folks in the industry and people not in the industry who are, kind of into it. But certainly it's drawing people, most who have some sort of like religious or spiritual background, or if that's an important kind of thing to them.
Yeah. That takes me well into my next question, which is about the Oregon industry specifically. Tell me about getting to know the Oregon industry and selecting wines for the shop, but also people you're going to be, who are going to be part of your community. How have you gotten to know the industry? Who's represented here, and how have those relationships built?
Initially, when we started, we were like, our perspective was like, oh, we'll carry a few local wines, but it won't really be our focus because this, it was always conceived of as this is primarily European wines, and still the majority of our stuff is from there. But as time has gone on, we've kind of organically developed relationships with people who have either like connections through distributors or people that have come into the shop with a lot of like small winemakers, small independent winemakers. And I can't even remember when we started doing the First Friday thing, but we've...
Early.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's been a couple years now that we've, almost every First Friday of the month, we will have a small local winemaker that comes and pours their wines. And that's just been a really fun way to introduce the wines to people in the neighborhood. And it's like, it's like usually somewhere between $5 to $10 to taste stuff. And I guess the winemaker gets to talk with people. And anything else to say about that?
Yeah, we're like 95% European, and we always carry like a few Pinots and Chards on the shelf. But like I didn't realize how many new producers would swing by the shop, be like, hey, can we taste you on the wines? And like, the ethic of buying is about like a hyper localized economy, that like resources are not being returned to large companies, but they're being invested into people who are like doing the real work. And so like when we work with these small producers, like we just don't have the space to have every small producer, but like everybody can have a turn, and like, so we commit to buying, I hope it's not an insignificant amount of wine from them to like pour by the glass to put on the shelf. We want the tickets to cover the sample bottles, so they're not just like sacrificing bottles and not being able to sell anything. So yeah.
Tell me about creating an Aura at Labora house wine.
Yeah, so Mike from across the street, who is a brewer and has Commensal, sent his buddy LJ over. He's like, you should try LJ's wines. And so LJ Brimfield, he's one of the founders of the Night Market, trained under Dominique Lafon, got going at Evening Land. And LJ was like, hey, I've got like Shiner bottles. If we could design a label and you could do a house wine. And we were like, yeah. So we put a label together and...
Oh, can I talk about that?
Yeah.
My friend, who is a landscape architect, but also like on the side just loves painting and is really into doing watercolors. I saw one of her watercolors at her house, and I was like, would you ever be interested in doing a watercolor of our shop? And so that's what became the label, Karen Farmer. She did a really wonderful job. Yeah.
And I stubbornly insisted on naming the wine's Liturgia, which has Greek origins. It means work of the people, but liturgy refers to kind of like the religious practice of praying and worshiping together. And then each bottle is named for a different hour of the liturgy of the hour. So monks come together, multiple times throughout the day to pray, and so the bottles are matins, lauds, Sext and None, right? Sext. And so now we're talking with like 2 winemakers whose wines we featured before, who are like doing, we're going to do kind of like.
We've gone through the initial batch of house wines, so now we're kind of leaning into other small winemakers that we've already worked with to figure out what we're going to do for the next round.
You talked earlier about one of the things one of the ethics of the shop was to make wine approachable and to make sure that people didn't feel like they had to have a certain, or there was no barriers to entry. So tell me about that. Customer walks into the shop, you don't know them. What is the approach here? What do you want them to experience while they're here?
I think people walk in there like, oh, this is going to be fancy. Like, this is out of my league. And so everything we do in our power, like we want the aesthetic to be clean and elegant, but we also want it to be playful. So like, there's a sign over there that says fancy ass gift bags. We carry stickers and merch from shitty wine memes.
Dave loves his little cards that he gets to write on the table over there, and people really like those because they often have little, irreverent comments and stuff.
So like, this is a great Côte d'Azur blend of Sauvignon and Chardonnay. And so the placard says, oh shit, it's a blend of Chardonnay and Sauvignon. The French love puns and portmanteaus from 2 best buddies in the Jura. My favorite placard that I wrote was for a bottle of Chocolina that's not here anymore, but it said, every time I drink Chocolina, I play Daddy Yankee's Gasolina in my head and replace the lyric. And so like, the placards are meant to be like, people come in and they kind of have this first impression, but when I think they begin to look at the details, it's like, oh, like these are the people who work here and like want to have fun. Like,
I have another example of that on our food menu. Dave insisted that instead of writing small bites, we write nom-noms. I tried to change it many times, and he's like, nope, it's going to be nom-noms on here.
That's what we're trying to, but it's like frivolity, but not meaningless frivolity. It's intentional.
You talked earlier about story, obviously, storytellers, wine and stories. So tell me about how do you take the role of conveying someone else's story? You are a customer, you are a winemaker, you're in the middle of that, right? You're in the middle of that. How do you understand someone's story well enough to convey it to someone else? And what do you think is important about the story that you do make sure your customer understands?
I feel like you should take this one. I mean, the thing is that Dave's like a walking encyclopedia, so he remembers so many details about so many of the wines, which I find really remarkable. I can do that with a smaller percentage of the wines, but I'm always amazed at like how much he retains.
So I want to be able to tell the stories of each bottle as much as possible. And that's where like the extensive notes I take come into play.
Yeah.
But like for our wine club, like I write a letter for each club. And so it's kind of like an introduction to the theme of the month. This letter has a primer on Gamay and the history of Beaujolais. And then kind of the stories of the producer, why they're interesting. Kind of, that's the focus. And I don't give tasting notes. Like I hint at what this wine will go well with, maybe. The structure, but like I'm not about, in the 6 pages, like this isn't tasting notes. I don't know, was that satisfactory?
Yeah, so it's like sometimes it's the winemaker's history, their ethos, the place that the wine comes from.
And the longer this is around, the more producers we meet. So like the better we're able to tell their stories in person,
And that is a yeah, so helpful in being able to talk about the wine.
So let's look ahead a little bit. Tell me about what is next for the shop. What have you not done that you want to do? What do you want to do bigger or better? What does the future look like for the shop here?
I mean, one of the things that's on the horizon, though not like, we don't have a specific timeline on it just yet, is because we've really enjoyed when we're able to meet producers in person and how it changes the experience for us. We want to offer that as an opportunity to people that are interested in traveling somewhere. So that's kind of something we've talked about. It would be small, but like bringing a small group to a wine region and visiting producers there, and hopefully having kind of experiences with those producers that's different than what you would get if you just were going to, if you Googled where to taste wine in this region, so kind of more like up close and personal, also with producers that you might not have access to. So that's one thing.
Yeah. I mean, well, the whole reason why this has become sustainable, and we're month to month, don't get me wrong, but like we're comfortable more or less. It's only become sustainable because of word of mouth. And so kind of like we hold everything lightly, like we didn't expect to open up a second space. But like now we're doing private events on a regular basis. And, I'd like to do more things off-site, but I don't know what that looks like. And so Deanna, our very first employee, and I chatted about that a few months ago. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for to really lean into our mission of wine education and bring it to people's homes or to restaurant staffs, because we live in an age where there are fewer and fewer sommeliers and at restaurants. And I think I'd be curious to be able to help restaurant staff talk about the wines, their beverages better. We'll see. I don't know. But also, we're kind of a fuck around and find out operation in a positive way. So we just kind of when people bring ideas, we try to work them out and see if we can.
Seems to be working so far. I appreciate that model. So tell me about, obviously it's a complicated time right now for alcohol, for selling alcohol, for all of that. Tell me about how that has manifested for you, how you're feeling in the moment, and what you kind of see going forward for the alcohol industry, the wine selling industry, the bottle shop industry. What are the biggest challenges of the moment? What does the future look like?
I mean, globally, the two areas of wine that are seeing decreases are super luxury and the really cheap mass market stuff. And even though we didn't intend to, 75% of our inventory is under $50. And that 20 to 40 range is the area of wine that hasn't seen that huge dip. Because it's where real quality starts. It's a price point that's affordable, that's coming from real people who are doing a lot of manual labor, who are doing the farming themselves. And when I think about, the cost of a $50 bottle provides 5 drinks, people are game to spend $15 on a cocktail, but the idea of a bottle that's $50 or $60 can be intimidating. And yet, cocktails historically are meant as an aperitif, or a digestif. But wine is the thing that elevates food, and food can elevate wine. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about where am I going to put my dollars to work to enjoy life more? A $50 bottle is going to be incredible, and reasonable as a cost. And so part of like what we do is we have so many wines under $40. That's kind of like this whole horizontal
It's like your 20s.
shelf here. And yeah, so it's kind of like helping our customer base come to appreciate that like wine can be really exceptional, but also like really affordable. And yeah, we could spend more money if you want a special occasion bottle for something that'll like really blow your hair back. But yeah.
Future for the two of you, out personally or professionally, anything else you're excited about on your horizon?
Yeah. How to answer that? We're continuing to raise our kids and get them get out of the toddler stage, which we're having a lot of fun in, but it's a lot of work to run your own business and have a 5-year-old and a almost 2-year-old.
We have a dog who's a pretty good nanny though.
Yeah. No, she's actually not great at all. She's sweet, but kind of dopey. Yeah, I think down the road, but like with no timeline, I see myself working in like doing nonprofit work at some point. But I also don't know what that would look like. Maybe that's you know, somehow in connection with the shop. It's really very open-ended. So I don't have too much to say about that, but.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that I'd die of a heart attack in a classroom in front of high school students. Like, that's how I always wanted to go. That would still be
Which would be very traumatic for them.
They'd get over it.
It's a good life lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think I'd have practice of dying well, philosophy. Yeah, I really miss being in the classroom, but I don't know what that'll look like. At this point, I'm so deep into this that like, I really want to keep one foot in this and then one foot in education, but it would have to be like the right job and to come along where like I could still kind of do both.
We're big dreamers too, so like we talk about like, oh, maybe we will make wine someday or something like that. But you know, that's sometimes who knows what'll happen. Anything's possible.
We're also not in our 20s, and there are lots of people who start making wine later in life, but like, I mean, it's an apprenticeship thing, right? Like really good winemakers apprentice for years.
Yeah.
And yeah, who knows? I don't know. Don't have the capacity for that.
I thought you just kind of threw it in the barrel and it just made itself. I didn't think it was a whole lot. Last question for the two of you, and this can be, I would love to hear each of your answers. Tell me about, to this point, biggest achievement or proudest accomplishment. What are you proudest of as you look back at what you've done so far? Personally, professionally, in wine or out?
I'm proud of the community that we've created here. That people who, you know, come here on a regular basis and feel welcomed. They've met other friends here, which I just think is like so wonderful to see. And those friends have integrated into their lives. And our community of friends has grown from this as well. Both of our coworkers and our customers. You know, we've gone to dinner at our customers. We've gone to dinner at their houses before, and that's been really lovely.
I think on an economic level, the fact that we've committed to paying our staff like well above what is standard. And I've always thought that like wine is the medium, but it's not the goal. Like it's not the reason for, it's what allows us to keep the lights on, but like really this space exists for like human heat and human connection and education. And those are intertwined inextricably for what we do. Yeah.
All right. All the questions that I have for the two of you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't talk about today that you were hoping to talk about?
I think we covered some good ground.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you got it.
I would like to point out that for our listeners that Dave is wearing a shirt that says "Real Men Marry Redheads."
Yes.
If you can't see it, it's pretty great. And it took me halfway through the interview to realize that's what it said. So
Yeah, Sarah got this for me for our engagement pictures.
He came downstairs today wearing the t-shirt. I was like, you do know this interview's on camera, right? And he's like, oh yeah.
I'm going to wear a sweater blazer too.
Yeah.
this was well thought out.
Yeah.
Thank you both for taking
Yeah,
the time
thank
to
you.
share with us. We appreciate you taking the time to show off your shop and share your stories
Absolutely.
with us. I'll go ahead and let you off the hook. Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.